Welcome to SF Commercial Property Conversations with Bruce Bean, where Bay Area investments meet expert insights. Get ready to unlock the strategies of commercial real estate success.
So today we have Tim Vi Tran with us, and Tim has a very interesting story about getting into commercial real estate. So Tim, it's great to have you. I want to hear how you came from Vietnam to Texas and then Merchant Marines and on from there. So give us a little clue of how that all happened.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your podcast, Bruce. Very happy to be here. Yeah, I am an immigrant from Vietnam. My family immigrated from Vietnam to the United States. I left when I was about 5 years old. We spent about a year or so on a refugee island in the Philippines.
Oh, wow.
And eventually we left Philippines and landed on U.S. soils. And so when I arrived, our family was, basically immigrants to the country with no money. We didn't speak the language, and it was a fresh start. And I grew up in Dallas and went to school there and excelled academically. And so I applied for college and got a 4-year scholarships, went to the United States Merchant Marine Academy in New York. And when I graduated, I went to work for a defense contractor. One of my obligations for being sent to school on a 4-year scholarship paid by the Navy, even though the school is Merchant Marine, was to do two things. I needed to be in the reserve, and then I also needed to work in an industry that's related to shipping. So I went to work for Northrop Grumman, and the division that I worked at design piping systems for Navy destroyers and DDGs and things like that, aircraft carriers. So at that time, in 1994, a lot of design were done by hand, and companies were getting involved with designing using computer. And so I got put on this project and, design piping systems using computers. And I got involved with Unix and other aspects of, operating system that the software ran on. That's how I went from a systems engineer to becoming a software engineer. I eventually went back to get my master's degree in software engineering, and did that for a number of years and decided I want to give a different career a try after I fulfill my obligations. And that career was real estate. And
so you started out actually in residential real estate.
You're correct. I started out as an appraiser first. I got my license as an appraiser, tried that out, didn't really fit my personality and my technical background with engineering. Then I dabble in residential real estate for a little bit. Again, didn't really find a good match there. And one day I was meeting a colleague, and she said, "Hey, Tim, with your technical background in software engineering and systems engineering, maybe look into commercial. In fact, go look at what CCIM can do for you." And so I did that, and that's how I got into commercial real estate. And it's been about 25 years since I've been in this business.
So was Northrop in the Fremont area? Was that why you got to Fremont?
Oh, good question. Northrop is a big company. At the time, I think they had somewhere around 100,000 employees throughout the world. And
Wow.
I was actually stationed in the Washington, D.C. area. I went to school in New York, and after I graduated, I drove all the way home back to Dallas, and then I got this offer letter in the mail, and they offered me a job. So I drove to Washington, D.C. to accept the job, and I stayed there for about 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So then how did you end up in Fremont?
Ended up in Fremont because the first year that I fulfilled my obligation as a reservist, I came to San Francisco, and at that time, Treasure Island was still open.
Oh.
So I did my reserve duty there. And I came here. The weather was just beautiful. There's good food. I mean, I was running around in shorts in the winter, and I thought, hey, I wouldn't mind living here. So one, and I started to formulate a plan. I went back and I told myself, I think I'm going to move to California,
Oh,
and I
wow.
did.
Okay. That's fantastic. So is that where you worked for Keller, was in Fremont?
Well, at that time, I was working for Keller Williams in Palo Alto. They had
Okay.
an office on Hamilton Avenue, and I worked there for a few years. I want to say probably less than 2 years. And so I eventually left. And when I left Keller Williams, um, I I decided I want to pivot towards commercial, and I had already got my broker's license, so I started the Ivy Group.
So tell me a little bit about the Ivy Group and how you've built over 25 years a consistent industrial commercial real estate business.
Yeah, that's a great question. The Ivy Group really was born out of necessity when I was working for these different companies, especially Northrop. I was an investor, right? I invested in properties and I liked it a lot. So the Ivy Group was born out of necessity in a sense that I felt like there's people out there that can utilize my skills, and so I started to use the um, spreadsheets and the analytical skills that I learned as an engineer, and I apply that analysis to commercial real estate. And as you know, commercial real estate could be very math intensive. There's a lot about numbers and things like that, right? So the Ivy Group was born with that aspect in mind. The other traits that I wanted to make sure that the Ivy Group carry was our principles. When I was in the military, they drill in our head that being self-motivated, being transparent, being honest, and these are all leadership skills that they instill in you. So I took those core principle skills and also apply that toward the Ivy Group. And so it's a little bit of technical, is a little bit of my upbringing, is a little bit of just things that I learned through the military, and I apply that all towards the Ivy Group.
So how many people work with you there?
We have 5 licensed real estate agents right now, and we also have people that we help us. They're virtual admins. They're based
Hmm.
throughout the world, and so some of them will be doing some of our marketing and flyers and things like that. But overall, locally, we have 5 licensed agents. Combined, I would say we have over 100 years real estate experience.
And are you completely focused on industrial or do you do other commercial avenues?
Personally, I like to do a lot of industrial properties along the 880 corridor. We're based out of Fremont, and so that's been my niche. Other agents are really good with other asset type. For example, Sandeep is really good with hotels.
Mm.
We have Diego, Joseph, and David. They'll dabble with retail and some industrial assets. But for me, I personally like to do industrial. That's my niche. And why industrial? Well, when you look at an industrial property, it's about the power, it's about the ceiling height, it's about
Mm.
the capacity of the fire sprinklers, right? Again, that all kind of ties back into the systems engineering aspect of the technical aspects of my upbringing, right? My background when I went to college.
So I'm curious, you mentioned VAs, so I'm wondering how long you've been in that kind of VA world and how's that going?
VA meaning the Veterans Administration.
No, 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 I'm sorry, the virtual assistants.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry, I'm getting
yeah,
confused
two,
there.
yeah, sorry, yeah, two different items. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like anything. We actually had worked with another local firm, and we pivoted to VA. Number one, because the rate that you're paying a VA is going to be, completely different than, let's say, a rate of somebody you're paying here in the Bay Area, right? That's number one. Number two, we felt that we want to hire multiple VAs because it's very hard to just find that one person that can do marketing, that can do sales, that can do follow-up calls and things like that, right? They can draft, LOIs. So by going the VA route, you don't necessarily save money, but you have more people at your disposal that are very good at certain things. Like certain VAs may be really good at video, and the next VA may be good at InDesign, right? So VA's been working out really well for us. I think the initial training with the VA was a little bit of a challenge because they have to understand how you work, and kind of getting around the hours and the differences in the time zone. But once they understood that and we trained them on specifically what we need them to do, it worked out really well, and we're very, very happy with our VAs.
Oh, that's fantastic. So I'm curious that you actually have your VAs writing your LOIs.
Very basic LOI. We have a template that we work off of, like
Yeah.
most brokers do, and then we go in, we said, okay, this, and when we're representing, let's say, a landlord versus a tenant versus a seller versus a buyer, it's all templated. They just need to just start a real simple template. I go in and I modify it based on my discussions with the client before we send it out. So VAs could help in that sense. Although recently we've been kind of pivoting towards AI to do a lot of that kind of stuff, so that we can free our VA to do um, tasks that are more human centric that's needed rather than having AI generate some sort of a quick response.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's in my, kind of my next question is how much are you using AI now?
I like to say we want to use more AI, but the challenge that we're running into with AI is just growing so fast.
Hmm.
And things that you've done and set up today may be obsolete, right? So initially when we started using AI, it was ChatGPT. You put in your prompts, they give you, spit out an answer, and it wasn't very accurate, right? And as time goes by, it's more accurate and you could learn to trust it more.
Right.
But what we're doing is we're actually beginning to pivot more towards Claude, because Claude, you can do code, you can do co-work, and you can do, obviously, chat, right? So we felt that um, there's better opportunities for us to set up our AI to help us do some of our, for example, listing proposals, for example. A lot of that stuff is done that I think AI can help us do the initial research, like gathering comps, figuring out what the property is worth using the income approach to valuation and things like that, right? So we're learning. The learning curve is not steep, but it does take time to set it up. And you have to be very specific about what you're asking AI to do, just like you would with a real person, right?
Right.
If you're given instructions in garbage, you're going to get garbage out. But if you're very specific about what you need, then you get better outcomes.
Right. Right. No, that's very interesting. So tell us a little bit about the market in Fremont. What's happening there right now?
I mean, I would say the market in Fremont is just pretty hot.
Oh,
You hear a
okay.
lot of stories about there's a lot of vacancies and things like that. Well, for me, I focus on a lot of industrial property, flex spaces, and of the 66 million or so square feet that's in Fremont, depending on which zip code you're looking at, like Southern Fremont, Warm Springs area, we're looking at probably 2 to 3% vacancy factor, right? I
Oh,
mean, there's
wow.
virtually very little inventory. But if you're heading, let's say, further north, then that's going to change to, I would say, maybe 5 or 6%, right? But then when you look at, let's say, flex and R&D space, in let's just take North San Jose as an example, it's going to be a completely different picture.
So what's driving the market down there? What kind of firms are coming into that area?
A lot of firms that are coming to Fremont, number one, they know that the rental rates are a lot lower, for example, 20 to 30% lower. Number two, the city has done a great, fabulous job encouraging manufacturing to come to Fremont.
Oh,
And we're rated pretty high in terms of like satisfaction with families and workforce and everything. So with that being said, accessibility to transportation, freeways, there's been a lot of new development that's happening in Fremont, and so people are starting to notice that, hey, you know what? For the same amount of property, let's say Fremont hypothetically versus Mountain View, I mean it's night and day, right?
oh
Rent
yeah.
wise is night and day.
So it sounds like sort of a lot of your clients are coming from the South Bay, from Mountain View or Sunnyvale or over in the valley, and they're kind of transitioning towards Fremont just because prices are less expensive, housing is less expensive. All of those factors seem to maybe be driving things your way.
Yeah, I mean, I would say they're coming from all over. We're working with international clients, and they realize sometimes they need to be close to Tesla, right?
Oh yeah.
Or
Okay.
or maybe a CEO lives and works in Fremont, and he really wants his headquarters to be around here. So I would say they're coming in from all over when the price makes sense and when the location makes sense. And also the other factor I failed to mention earlier is access to talent, and Fremont has a
Mm.
lot of that, right?
Oh,
So,
that's
so
interesting.
with the recent, built out of Warm Spring BART station, now we have two BART stations in Fremont, hopefully three in the future with Irvington. It makes an attractive um, proposition to sell it to your board or whoever you're dealing with that's making real estate decisions that, we ought to look into Fremont. With that being said, we just completed a lease in Sunnyvale, and it's a company that we've been working with since their startup days, and they went public on NASDAQ. And so for
Mm.
them, Fremont wasn't going to cut it, because if they did, they would literally lose about 30-40% of their workforce.
Oh
Number
wow.
one. And number two, they really wanted to be on the peninsula, right?
Mm.
For the attraction of, investors and things like that.
So how far and wide do you go? You go from the South Bay up to Hayward or even further?
I mean, whatever 80 runs, I would say, my cutoff is probably mid to North San Jose, and then
Mm.
all the way up to Oakland. That's really where I like to focus my energy and resources and connections.
So are you working mostly on the landlord side or the tenant side?
That's a great question. When I first got into this business, we were basically taking pretty much any deal that, just to get the
Mm.
experience, to showcase your expertise. And so, by, naturally, most people who work in commercial real estate, and this, Bruce, is
Oh yeah.
leasing, right? Because the way they
Yeah.
built out commercial is mostly big buildings, and big landlords own these assets. So that means they buy the asset and they lease it out to a tenant. So
Hmm.
so we did that for a long, long time. And then I would say 5 or 6 years ago, we strategically pivoted from less leasing to more representing sellers.
Mm.
Why? Because we felt that when sellers are realistic and they're pricing their properties right, we're gonna get it sold, right? I mean, that's the holy grail of commercial real estate. You talk to any agent, they either want to
Yeah.
work with a seller or they want to work with a landlord, right? When you price it
Right.
right,
Right.
it's gonna close.
Right.
So with that being said, I would say nowadays we're probably working with a lot of sellers, 60%, and leasing probably to 40%.
Yeah. So in terms of cold calling, are your VAs doing the cold calling for you?
We tried that. VAs didn't work well for cold calling
Mm.
because it's just the way they talk. When you got somebody from, let's say, the Philippines, they're addressing you as sir, madam. It's too
Mm.
formal, right? We don't talk
Mhm.
that way. I'm not gonna call you Mr. Bruce or Mr. Bean. Well, maybe I'll call you Mr. Bean because it's a cool name. But
Right.
I'm not gonna call you Mr. Bruce, right? I'm just gonna say, hey, Bruce, what's going on? That's how we talk, right? But
Right.
when you get somebody who's a little bit more formal, they're gonna talk a little bit more different. It's not, hey, how's it going, Mr. Bruce, right?
You're
It's
right. Right.
how you doing today, Bruce? What's going on, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to having a conversation, especially when you're cold calling, there's a lot of resistance, right? So you want to have somebody who's just a little bit more fluid, And nothing wrong with having an accent because I feel like I still have an accent to some degree.
Yeah,
But
beautiful
then,
accent. Yeah,
when you're cold calling, that gets picked up, right, by a potential client.
right,
So we do the cold calling. I do the cold calling, but we don't do as much cold calling as we used to because we're doing a lot of different things that are driving um, potential clients to call us first. Okay,
right,
and what I mean by that is we're using AI, we're using SEO, search engine optimization, we're using our website, we're using Yelp and all these, Google and different, LinkedIn platforms to drive people to call us. And it's been working very successfully. When I started, I used to have a list of, 100, people on this list, and it's got their phone number and names, and I would call them, and I have a script that I worked off of. Well,
right,
nowadays we do less of that. We still do cold calls, but by the time somebody calls us, because they've already vetted us, they've already studied us, they know what we're capable of. We're now talking about a real project when they call this. What's your address? What are you looking to do? You looking to sell or you looking to lease? What are your challenges? So we get right into the conversation and start talking about solutions, right?
right.
So we don't really
Yeah,
do that many more cold calls per se nowadays.
yeah. You're more on the warm call side, so to speak. Like we think this is actually going to turn into some project.
Yeah, exactly. And when we have a call with a first time client, we'll maybe spend literally 2 or 3 minutes talking about who we are, and then we get right into the project. What is it that you need us to solve for you, right? Whether you're looking to sell, partnership dispute, or there's a divorce and so what do you need us to solve for you? Or you need you have a certain time frame you need to complete this by, and so we draw on our experience, and then we take a deal that we've done, like a case study, and we explain to them, this is how we'll do it. Of course, we'll customize it to the new client's needs, but you get into that deep level of conversation.
That's fantastic. I'm sure that creates a lot of personal connection between you and the potential client.
It does, and nowadays everyone's time is so valuable, so we don't want to waste 10 minutes on a call just talking about who we are. We get right into it. How I'm Tim Tran. I solve all your problems using commercial real estate, and I work in the 880 corridor, and I like
Yeah,
to do
I'm
industrial
right
property.
here.
That's it, right?
Yeah, right. So you're leaning more towards the sales side, which I can understand completely because that's kind of a much better reward at the end of the close, so to speak. I'm sure that's worked out nicely for you. So how is the sales market going these days?
Again, sales market is just very bifurcated. I would say if this is an industrial property and is priced well, let's say in a great location with access to freeways and it has good parking, high ceilings and good power, I would say if you price it right, it will sell. But given the same amenities in the same building, if you're 10, 20, even 30%, and you're just testing out the market, it's going to sit
Yeah,
on the market, right? I mean, that's just the reality of what's happening out there with all this geopolitical and interest rate uncertainties. Now, with that being said, if you're pricing, let's say, a piece of vacant land, that's going to be a different strategy versus, let's say, an office or a retail property, right?
right.
So I
Yeah,
would say the market is very bifurcated. It really you really have to hone in on that specific property and figure out how are you going to position this property relative to everything that's on the market, let's say within a 5 or 10 mile radius, right? What's
right.
unique about this property that you want to highlight? And I think when you do that, and that's what we actually do as part of our listing proposal, we have a higher chance of pricing it right, and we have a higher chance of selling it.
Yeah, no, I would think that, and you're sort of the experts in that marketplace, so you know all the people, you know all the players, you know all the buyers. So that certainly helps, I'm sure, to get people to potentially list with you.
That certainly helps. I think, being out there and being involved with the community, taking leadership roles and giving back to, CCIMs like organizations like CCIM certainly helps. A while back, I was a volunteer for the city of Fremont. I sat on their Economic Development Advisory Commission for 11 and a half years until I termed out. And so all those things that you do helps, right? Get your name out there, get the image out there, get the branding out there. I heard you earlier today, you're a member of Rotary. Well, I'm also a member of the Rotary Club of Fremont.
Oh,
And
nice.
so that all helps, right? When you do these kind of things, you're not just out there trying to get a deal just to close the deals and earn your commission. You really are doing things that benefits the community. For example, in 2020, when we first had the COVID shutdown, the COVID lockdown, for a good 6 months, I really just didn't really have a whole lot of activities like most people, right? So I decided to run 1,000 miles that year,
Oh,
and
wow.
so I did complete that, and as part of that run, I went to the Rotary Club and I made an announcement that this is my goal is to do this. I want to raise $5,000 for this club,
Oh,
and
oh,
I think I raised like about 45 or 4,600. I don't remember the exact number.
wow.
And
That's
so you
impressive.
do these kind of things, it helps a lot, right?
Oh, yeah. No, for sure. That's fantastic. Well, we'll have to talk about our San Mateo fun run. And you can come over and run with us next October 18th. So that would be great.
Absolutely. Let me know. I mean, I'm an avid runner too, by the way. Every morning when I wake up, the first thing I do, I don't look at my phone. I do my meditation. And then after that, I drop off the kids at school and I go to, I'm near Lake Elizabeth. Now I do my, 2 to 4 miles run, depending on how much time I have. And then I'll crank out, 50 to 100 push-ups. And so I'm an avid runner. I love to run. If there's a way that I can turn running into a cause, that's even better.
All right. Well, we're going to have to talk about this offline. I think that's fantastic. I want to come back and talk to you again in 3 to 6 months and just see how the market is doing in Fremont and see what's new with AI. Everything's changing so fast right now. It's just hard to keep up. So it's fantastic to have you on. Tim, where can people get a hold of you?
Yes, they can get a hold of me. Website here. Let me scoot over a little bit. You can see www.theivygroup.com. You can also call me 510-213-8883. I'm out there on LinkedIn. I'm out there on Facebook. There's many different ways you can find us. You can Google search Tim Tran at the Ivy Group, and we're probably number one.
All right. Well, I look forward to talking to you again in the very near future. I think we're going to talk about the fun run and all sorts of different things here.
Sounds good, Bruce. Thanks for having me on this podcast. I really enjoyed it, and thanks for having me here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. What a great podcast.
That's a wrap on today's journey through the SF commercial real estate scene. Ready to share your story? Visit sfcommercialconversations.com/guest. Your insights could lead the next conversation.